we're broadcasting.
Okay.
And we have
My name is Joanne Pissarro. I'm the president of Metropolitan College of New York. I'm honored to be convening this important town hall, and I'm honored that it's MCNY that's the venue for this important conversation. Metropolitan College of New York was founded originally in the 1960s by social activists who wanted to find new pathways for adult students to become professionals. Our mission from the outset has been social justice. The way we achieve social justice is through a curriculum that we call purpose-centered education that engages every student every semester in a project that's aimed to develop, implement, and assess some action or some program to improve products or services in their workplace or internship site. Students do that every single semester, and we aim to assure that by the time they graduate, they are well equipped to bring constructive change to their workplace, to their internship sites, but most importantly for us, to our communities. So we're honored to be part of these very important conversations that, you know, it's hard to even date when these conversations started, but this particular one with the death of George Floyd, but with so many others before him, we've seen the criminalization of Black and brown skin. We've seen new awareness for the need for those of us without Black and brown skin to do our own anti-racism work deeply with each other and support our colleagues and our communities. And MCNY is the venue for this kind of conversation. This is what our community is about. We support social justice, we support anti-racism, we support Black Lives Matters, and we're so honored to have this kind of town hall connected to our community. I'm grateful to Dr. Leslie Branch for bringing this conversation forward. And it's now my honor to introduce to you our very own Vice President for Academic Affairs, Humphrey Frickendale, who'd like to say a few words. Thank you and welcome, everyone.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Pissarro, and I want to extend a warm welcome to all of our guests who are joining us for this most important discussion. At the height of the demonstrations immediately following the death, the murder, the lynching of George Floyd, Metropolitan College of New York and its community wanted to do lots of things. And while we were thinking about what we would do, Dr. Branch wrote a very powerful piece that has been published. And I reached out to her and asked her if she could use the essence of her article as the basis for this conversation that we will have tonight. And as is the case at Metropolitan College of New York, Dr. Branch did not hesitate for one moment. She just said, tell me what you need me to do to make this happen. And I think that that is emblematic of who we are at Metropolitan College of New York. We might be a very small institution, but we are keenly aware of the issues that are of significant importance to our communities, and we want to be able to weigh into the conversation, and that's what we are doing tonight. So I want to again say thank you to Dr. Branch. It's been a while, Joey, since I have seen you. I take that back. I see you way too often on television, but never in person anymore. But it is so good to see you here tonight. Thank you for coming. And again, to Dr. Harris and the others, I'm pleased. I have a narcissistic streak. Maybe I shouldn't mention that in as much as the president's family member has described him as having some narcissistic tendencies, but I have some narcissistic tendencies when it comes to Metropolitan College of New York. And I'm also pleased that on the panelists will be two alums who will weigh into this discussion. And again, that speaks to who we are as Metropolitans. So my Linda, it is so good to see you. And to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this important conversation. And with that, at the risk of having my Pentecostal fervor to come out and talk forever, I'm going to shut up and ask Dr. Branch to take it over from here.
Thank you, Vice President Frickendale, and thank you so much, President Passaro. I'm now going to ask Mr. Hahn to cue up the introduction for our town hall.
Tonight's town hall is framed in an intersectional context. Those contexts are America's continued racial injustice toward Black people, the worldwide protests following the killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, and the COVID-19 pandemic's disproportionate negative impact on Black and Brown communities in every dimension of socioeconomic well-being. This town hall's purpose is to provide the MCNY community a space to engage in constructive dialogue and help us move toward individual and collective civic engagement in all of its forms.
Thank you so much, everyone. And again, good evening and welcome. Thanks for joining us at Metropolitan College of New York's virtual town hall on racism in America. We'd like to thank our panelists for joining us. And we have with us this evening, Mr. Joey Jackson, principal of Joey Jackson Law, PLLC, and CNN legal analyst. We have Dr. Rasan Harris, Chief Executive Officer at Citizens Committee for New York City, and Melinda Roscoe, MPA, political influencer, Chair of the New York State Young Democrats, Caucus of Color, and MCNY alumna. I want to again thank President Passaro and Vice President Frickendale for providing the opportunity to engage as a community on this very important topic. I want to thank also my Metropolitan College of New York colleagues who have worked to make this event possible. Finally, I want to express gratitude to my husband, David Branch I, for setting up my equipment at home, because without him, I wouldn't be able to broadcast from home. And I want to thank also and express gratitude to my son, our son, David Branch II, for that beat that accompanied the opening video. And so tonight's event is being recorded and will be available on MCNY's YouTube channel in the not too distant future. And if you're not a subscriber, please be sure to subscribe, like, and follow the college and our panelists on their various social media platforms. You can find information about the colleges and the panelists' social media handles in the chat feature. Just in terms of housekeeping, the community can engage with one another and the panelists in the chat room. And if you have a question for the panelists, I ask that you please post them in the Q&A section of this platform. We will try to acknowledge as many questions as we can. There will also be an opportunity to engage with our panelists during the Q&A segment of this town hall, where you'll be able to use the raise your hand feature and audibly ask your questions. And so now, to move forward, this intersectional context that the introduction video spoke of has ushered us to this watershed moment. And quoting from a co-authored article of an opinion piece with Stacy Thomas, I ask this: across the US and even the world, we see protesters are righteously risking their lives in a pandemic to fight for justice for the Black race. A world that once scorned Black skin is now standing up for and risking its own life to lobby on behalf of its Black sisters and brothers. That is powerful, and it cannot be ignored. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Hahn to cue up the video of Kedron Bryant. And so, having added that very powerful voice to our narrative, I'm going to frame the first show question. Law's role and Blacks standing in America. I believe we first see Blacks written into American law in the form of the 3/5 compromise as a way to obtain a tax break, or to provide a tax break for northern states, and to provide more legislative representation to Confederate states. So the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness wasn't a promise to enslaved Africans or their progeny. We next see Blacks written into the law during the Reconstruction Amendments, and the concept of citizenship, its privileges, and its protections just never seemed to catch on substantively for Blacks. But we're here at this pivotal moment, and so now what? How do we move forward? And in the voice of 12-year-old Kedron Bryant, the young brother that we just listened to, Black folk are pleading. We just want to live. And so I invite our panelists to weigh in. Mr. Jackson, would you like to?
If Leslie Branch asks you to do anything, the answer to that is yes, of course. So let me just say that. First of all, let me just say that I am delighted to be here and to take this opportunity, of course, with your fine institution and the fine work you're doing in bringing people together and in having this important discussion. So I'm grateful that you allowed me to be part of this panel. I'm grateful that you're really lending a forum and an ear to this issue. I think we need to do that. And I'm certainly grateful to give my 3 cents as to what I believe needs to happen moving forward. If I ramble on, Leslie, by all means, just say, okay, we heard you, and you can move on to the next person. I have a tendency as a lawyer, perhaps, to talk too much. But let me tell you what I think we're doing here. You know, we are in very trying and very difficult times. And we are in times like, I mean, it's just, I can't say unimaginable, because we know our history and we know that we've been at a place like this before. And we know, though, that we've been at a place like this before, that we've been able to overcome it. But I think we're at really a crossroads. And what I'm proud about is that in this crossroads, we see people all coming together. When you look at the marches throughout the country and cities throughout the country, people protesting for justice, protesting because they know that Black Lives Matter, protesting because they know that, you know, you shouldn't be stopped for walking while Black, for driving while Black, for sitting in a store while Black, for being in a hotel or a restaurant or somewhere else while Black, and certainly you should not be killed by law enforcement because you are Black. And so what I am heartened by is the fact that we have seen so many people of all races, they be Asian, Italian, Irish, white, Black, green, coming together and marching, people of color, to say that enough is enough. And so where do we go from here? I think where we go from here is a few places. Let me say number one, we have to get our head around the issue of police and communities. We have to get our head around what reforms we can institute so that we can have the bridging of the gap between police officers who are valuable and necessary, communities that need them, but communities that need to be respected as well. And one of the things you're seeing here happening in New York is the issue of reform. How? And why do I raise the issue? I raise it because laws are important. And I know you can't legislate morality, and you can't legislate what a person does and how they do it. But I think when you have lawmakers who represent the public come together and take a stand, I think it's meaningful. Now, in New York State, what happened? We saw, for example, 50A. What does that mean in English? It means that officers have disciplinary records, and you see a lot of officers with those disciplinary records who are walking the streets, and we don't know what those disciplinary records are. We don't know what negative contact that they had with other people before. We don't know what else is in their particular profile or personnel file that may be detrimental. Well, guess what? It's no longer sealed. Now we know. What else did New York State do? New York State took action to make the Attorney General, a separate and independent entity of the state, take over prosecutions wherein officers obviously are harming people in the community. Now, I just want to be clear when we have this discussion. Now, policing is one component. And I'm not suggesting by any means that officers are out there meaning to kill people. I'm not suggesting that officers is a group of bad. Please don't mistake what I'm saying. What I am saying, and look, police, I salute them. They're out there every day. They're making us safe. They're doing the best they can. But when anyone missteps, there needs to be accountability. I don't care what uniform you have. I don't care who you're connected to. There needs to be accountability. And so by having the state attorney general involved, you have an independent entity that can hold them accountable. What else does it do? And I'll stop. It eliminates the chokehold that's killing so many people. In the powerful pieces that you played that were put together, we did see Eric Gardner and so many others there, but we have to stop that. And so I think legislation certainly is a way to move forward. And the last thing I'll say before I cede my time is that legislation is a start. And what I'm hoping is that New York State can serve as not only a beacon of hope, but it can serve as a beacon of leadership. We saw our governor during the coronavirus lock this state down. Why is that important? How's it relevant to this? It's important because it starts with leadership. And now what are you seeing? We're seeing other states that are having a of coronavirus because they didn't have the gut to do it. So if New York State takes leadership, perhaps it'll go to other states and they'll take leadership, and another state will take leadership. It starts with one, and just like interest, it compounds and it gets better. And so I'm hoping through legislation, I'm hoping through the marches of people of goodwill, hoping that with people seeing what's happening before them, that people will have a reckoning, and we can have a day of reckoning, and we can have excellent colleges like yours have a forum like this. We could express our views, where we can talk about our differences, but more importantly, we can devise solutions so that we can be in a place that we're not seeing people being uplifted. We're seeing people who are growing and developing, and we're seeing people who are held tightly and who are loved, and people in our community can prosper. And so that's what I think is a step moving forward. It's a very important step moving forward, and we have to get to that place of mutual trust and respect. Get to that place where we don't demean people and look at them negatively because of what they wear, how they look, how they wear their hair, how they wear their clothes, or the color of their skin. And I'm hopeful that we can get there. And I thank you, and I cede my time.
Thank you, Joey. I'm going to now ask Melinda to weigh in on that question, and then we'll follow up with Rasan.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having me. So I am a proud alumni of MCNY, where I earned my master's degree. So if you have not checked out MCNY, please do so. You might even want to enroll. Great school. But to answer your question, Dr. Branch, what can we do going forward? So I think that it's important to echo what Joey was saying about legislation. Legislation is very important. As you mentioned in my bio, I am the New York State Young Democrats Caucus of Color Chair, and I'm very proud of that, representing Democrats from all 62 counties throughout New York State, making sure that they have a competent and relentless voice who is a pro-Black activist, which is what I am and what I've always been, not just in light of recent events. It's only metastasized, and I began to gain more recognition because of that, but I've always been doing the work. But what can we do going forward? Number one, in addition to legislation, I encourage Black and brown people to run for office. I think that that's important. Many people say, I can't run for office. That's not something that I want to do. That's not me. The more Black and brown people that we have in office, the more change that will come. And I'm talking about not just any Black person. I'm talking about the kinfolk Black person. So we have a saying within the Black community that says, all skin folk are not kinfolk, right? So meaning just because you're Black, that doesn't mean that you share the interests and the ideals of Black people who have been traditionally oppressed throughout all of our history. So it's important that we have more of us running for office, also serving in judicial capacities. So for those of you who may not know, a lot of judges are not just appointed, but they can also be elected. So you have the power to, if you are an attorney and you see injustices, or if you're just a regular person and you see injustices and you say, you know what, I want to do something at the judicial level. I see Black and brown people being incarcerated at disproportionate rates, which is so true. You can do something about that by running for a judicial appointmentship, which is oftentimes a decade. So you'll be serving in that capacity for 10 years, and then you'll have to run again. So that's something that's important. So I want to see more of us running for office and having those leadership positions, also within our local communities. So for those people who say, okay, running for office is not for me, also serving as a judge, right, is not for me. You can definitely serve in your local communities. I know throughout New York City specifically, there are low-level entry roles called county committee. Each borough has it, and many of those seats go unfilled. And they are low-level entry positions into politics that doesn't require a lot of work. You're pretty much representing your 2 to 4 block radius within your community. And that's something that I encourage you to do. Again, we need more Black and brown people, specifically within roles that service us, right? So it's not enough to complain when we're not taking an active stance. So secondly, in addition to running for office, serving in our local communities and local capacities, I also encourage us to volunteer or serve on a campaign of someone who we believe in. So let's just say, for example, you're supporting John Smith. You think that John Smith is the best candidate to represent your community, and you're not able to serve in the capacity of a paid position, you can definitely volunteer, getting the word out. So making phone calls, making monetary contributions to their campaigns. Also, getting out, doing some get out the votes, handing out pamphlets and palm cards, letting people know about their messages. Again, we need to support ourselves. So at the political level, I think that that's something that's very important, in addition to making sure that we get out and vote. Voting is very important. If we forfeit our right to complain about anything, if we have the ability to vote and we deliberately make the conscious decision not to. So I think that that's another thing that's important. So making sure that we are running for office when and how we can, supporting campaigns of kinfolk Black people who are actually doing the work, who are invested in our communities, and also taking an active stance by serving in political campaigns. Everything is political, and I think that people undermine that and they say, well, Democrat versus Republican, but having a garbage can on the side street of your block, that's political, because you have to go through community boards and what have you. So those are some things to think about when we say, oh, we don't want to run for office. I think that more of us serving and leading on campaigns are important. And again, I do want to highlight, although I've been doing the work for decades, I do want to highlight MCNY again, because having earned a master's degree from this school, being an alumna, I'm very, very proud. That opened up opportunities for me to be more confident and to take seats at the table, even though I feel that the table shouldn't necessarily exist, but they do. But I'm more confident now to take seats at a table and say, you know what, I'm going to represent my community. I'm going to represent people who look like me, and I'm going to be unapologetic about it. So I have a sign behind me that says Black Women Lead. And we do. And I truly believe that part of the onus is on us as women to take initiative to do that. So that's another thing that we can do as women. Don't be apprehensive, don't be shy, don't be scared. Definitely get out there and lead. That's it.
Rasan? And so Melinda is an excellent segue into Rasan based on community. So Rasan?
Well, Melinda, thank you so much for all your comments, because they inspired so much thought from my standpoint. You know, people need to get involved to change laws, to make the world better, to make New York City better. So it takes individuals. Leslie and I went to graduate school together and got our doctorates together. So she's near and dear to my heart. And we had an opportunity to study under a professor who has really set the stage for us to understand the roots of where all this comes from. Yes, it's important to be good to your neighbor, but you need to understand the history of how we got here, to understand how we're positioned to our neighbor, and how the way we were set up at the beginning affects how we are today. And the reality is that this system was not set up for Black and brown people. And so the laws, as they are implemented, do not benefit us in the ways that they benefit who it was made for. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about United States being the greatest capitalist country in the world, that anyone's dreams can come true, and you go from the bottom and get to the top and create wealth. But how is that wealth generated? People came across the Atlantic and claimed land as their own. In that case, laws weren't working for the indigenous people that were in this country and in these lands. And in order to work the land, they brought people over from Africa to build their wealth. And laws were made, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was about the pursuit of happiness of landowners and folks that wanted freedom from a king in England, but wasn't really meant for the people that were either seen as property or seen as, you know, background when they came over and established the colonies and made our country. And so as laws became stacked on top of laws, you know, opportunity missed, you know, the indigenous people. It missed Black people. It missed women. There was a time when only landowners could vote. And so laws are made through processes that involve individuals, and individuals that are sometimes flawed. And as change happens, if you aren't intentional in deconstructing how laws were made and who they were made to benefit, then you won't be able to get to the problem. And so I think we all need to take a step back, and at MCNY, you have a great opportunity to study history, to be in dialogue with one another, to understand, you know, what the past was and how we got here. That's the first step. The second step is to be able to recognize that privilege is attributed to folks who have wealth and can build on wealth. And wealth is basically the name of the game. Those who have wealth have opportunities to back the candidates they want, to put them in office, to create the laws that they want. They hire police forces to protect their wealth, and they get the services first and access to education and health and all of those things before everyone else does. If we understand how wealth sometimes is used to create disparities, then hopefully we can have processes that attack some of those problems and try to even the playing field and be intentional about how we move forward. And it takes political processes and political will that is created by individuals that are educated. If you understand privilege, and we're talking about on race and blackness, blackness, a narrative of negativity was created around blackness to justify slavery, to justify subjugation, to justify all of the horrible things that were happening to Black people, because a civil society would not want to treat individuals that are worthy and deserving in such a horrible manner. And so the negative narratives that have come out that have been reinforced for folks who do not want to give up their power and privilege have led us to where we are. And hopefully we can get to a point where we can get past the history, get past the shame and guilt of privilege, and get to a point where we can share and all benefit from unity together. And that takes coalition building, that takes, you know, allies and co-conspirators, and it takes us really getting involved in political processes that we can create the country that we all imagined, that our founding fathers put great in paper, but have never really implemented well in practice. And our work is to fill the gap between the aspiration and the reality. And this moment where we sat down and unfortunately had to witness the murder of George Floyd because COVID had us all pause is maybe that moment that will inspire us to come together and create new institutions that work for all of us.
Thank you, Rasan. All right, so I'm going to move to my next question. And of course, I'm going to contextualize it. So there is great collectivism in the push to usher in racial equality and equity for America's Black folk. Maps of both the US and the world showed the American states, cities, and even countries of the world where protests were happening in response to George Floyd's murder and in support of Black Lives Matter. And so we've been here before, as Joey alluded to when he answered question number one. We've been at this moment before, at this precipice before, where the issue of racism was politicized and displayed. And aside from the visuals that we are now seeing on social media and on TV, what else do you attribute this great push to that is ushering in, hopefully, equality and equity for America's Black folk? And I will ask Melinda to respond first.
I'm gonna ask that you go to one of the other panelists. I'm actually having technical difficulty, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to then ask Rasan to pick up and then Joey to follow, and hopefully Melinda will be able to rejoin us.
No, thanks again, Dr. Branch. I alluded to it the first time. COVID knocked everyone off their feet and off their rhythm. The whole world had to pause. And a few things happened. First and foremost, we all felt our, mortality. There's a fear for your life. And I think people think about the world differently when they're thinking about survival. So that's the first thing. Second, as news came in, it was clear when you broke out the data by race and ethnicity that Black and brown people were dying at rates that were twice that of their white counterparts. And so that put race in the conscience of many people in that moment when we were able to get those data. And then as you looked at the Paycheck Protection Program, when the federal response came out and which businesses were able to benefit from getting that federal assistance, disparities of the past were also compounded. So on a health standpoint, if you already had diabetes or hypertension, you were much more susceptible to die from COVID. So those were issues and problems that came from living in food deserts and not having access to great health care. And so that disparity showed itself there. Being in places where banks didn't have great relationships with people of color and Black folks, it showed up. If you didn't have a great relationship with your bank, then you were not likely to get PPP. So the rates of getting that federal assistance were very low for Black and Latino people. And that was the setup for the murder of George Floyd. The emotion was there, the attention was there because there weren't sports and movies and concerts to really distract us. And everyone, unfortunately, was on timeout watching this murder take place. And I think that struck a nerve for everyone that, that this isn't who we are. This is not who we want to be, but this is where we've ended up because of our institutions in our past. And I think this generation right now has to help see our way economically out, but also from a justice perspective out of this crisis that we're in. And I think people feel the ownership and a responsibility to lead, the nation and New York City out of this crisis. And I think people feel this their moment. And so that's the opportunity.
Joey?
So let me just say that Dr. Harris broke it down beautifully. And, quite frankly, I'm here and there's not more I can say to the excellent points that he did say, but I will try and I will say something else. And what I will say is that there comes a point in time where, and I'll keep my mind very simple, okay? And Dr. Harris broke it down and I'm in accord with what he said, and it needed to be said, and I think it certainly is, very true. And so while I second his motion, I also say one thing that's so simple but so important, and that is that people is wrong. People can ultimately look, and when the world is watching and they see something that is so off kilter to what we represent as a society, that is so off kilter, that is so morally repugnant, that is so just disdainful, that I think the wrong of one person, the legacy they create is the coming together of others. And so what I think is that plain and simple, people had to see that. They saw that because we live in a society where we are very visual now. We have this technology. Imagine this. We're in a situation where I have the honor and privilege of speaking to you, with this program that your fine institution has put together, to have these excellent panelists here, these administrators, the technology people, your VPs, your presidents, and the guests here that will get to ask questions. We are in a technologically compelling world. I literally had 2 trials this week from my basement. I mean, that's insane, right? And so what does that have to do with this? It has to do with the fact that we're more engaged. We're capturing things that occur. The questions come up. Hey, are these new injustices? Was this never happening? What's wrong and why is it happening so much now? No, as we all know, it was happening, but we're capturing that happening. We're able to see that happening. We're able to get the visual that it did happen. When everybody gets the visual, right, and everyone sees and they look and they say something is wrong here, something is amiss here, something needs to be done about what we see here. And so I think it comes down to the point that we have people that can recognize what's wrong. And if you look at our moments and times in history, you see whatever dates you want to point to that things were wrong. If you look at the civil rights movement and the manner in which we were treated, things are wrong. And I won't get into history. I'll keep it brief, but I'll say this. You look back, what was the year, 1896, and we had versus Ferguson, separate but equal was the law of the land. You go over there and you go to that library, don't come to mine. You swim in that pool, don't swim in my pool. You go to that lunch counter and I'll go to my lunch counter. Separate but equal was the law of the land. We fast to 1954, we get Brown versus Board of Education, and we finally come to the place where separate but equal is no longer. But while I'm saying that, let me say this. You cannot legislate morality. You cannot legislate the fact that people say, oh, segregation can't exist anymore. I'm saying to you that separate but equal was wrong. No, You have to change more than laws. You have to change attitudes. You have to change perspectives. You have to change people's views on the world. And if you don't do that, the legislation, most respectfully, I'm talking about. I'm talking about that leading to a civil rights movement where enough is enough. What are we doing as a society that we can have legislation that says separate but equal is wrong, but we can have people segregated as ever? People saying, don't come here. People sprayed down with hoses. People in bad ways where society came together and said, no, it stops today. And so we're at that time and place now, where when you see a person who has a knee on their neck, and we all look at it, and we all examine this and we say to ourselves, something is wrong. Something has to be done. And what has to be done now. And so there are moments in our history where there's a reckoning. There are moments in our history where people look and they say, of all people of goodwill, of all colors, of all races and ethnicities and religions, people of goodwill come together and they say to themselves, change is gonna come, nephew. Change has to come now. And so I think we came to that place. And that place, why now, was because people saw and they said, you know what, through this technology we have, I love technology, but that's not the kind of stuff I wanna be seeing on my Twitter feed in the morning. That kind of stuff is repugnant. That kind of stuff is not what is representative of our country, is not representative of who we are as a people, no matter who you are. And so I think that motivated people to rise up. And so now the question is, as I conclude this, is we have an opportunity. Why do we have an opportunity? Because we have people's attention. And when you have people's attention, you get to the place that people are looking to see, now what now? What are we going to do about it? What steps are going to be put in place in a progressive perspective to make a real difference, to make a change, to make George Floyd's life meaningful, and to ultimately leave a legacy where, yes, you died, but if that life is going to live forever, we have to make that life have meaning. We have to get change as a result of that life. We have to prevent the death of others through your death itself. And so I say to you that what has happened is quite simple. And that simplicity is, people know ugly when they see it. You know, in studying law, there's an expression. And the expression, and they teach you this first year of law school, everyone define obscenity. Well, I don't know what obscenity is. No definition. But you know it when you see it. And you know wrong when you see wrong. And that was wrong. And I think it led to a burgeoning of emotions. It led to a visceral reaction. And so we're at that place of opportunity. And we're at a place where there is a reckoning and a coming together and an understanding that we have a moment. And each of us in time in our lives have a moment. But the critical issue is not that we have a moment. The critical issue is, what do you do with that moment? What reforms do you make with that moment? What cultural and institutional changes come about with that moment? And so I dare to say that we will be judged as a society based upon what we do moving forward, based upon what we implement moving forward, based upon relationships that develop and attitudes that are molded and adjusted and perspectives that are changed moving forward. And if we could change perspectives, and if we can change attitudes, and if we can change beliefs, and if we could instill values that everyone's meaningful and everyone has purpose, particularly people of color, then I think we go a long way of moving the narrative. And the death of George Floyd means something. The death of Eric Garner means something. The death of Ahmaud Arbery means something. The death of Trayvon Martin means something. And so I could go on with that list all day, and it's disgusting that I have to. But the fact is that let's bring value and meaning, because we have an understanding as a society that we have this chance. Let's use the chance wisely.
Thank you, Joey. And so I do have a follow-up question, but I'm going to ask if we can see if there are any questions in the chat to sort of give some of our participants an opportunity to have their questions answered. And so, Mr. Hahn, if there are any, would you be able to read them off and they might be addressed?
I'd be happy to do so, and we actually have 7 questions in the chat, so I will read them in the order in which they were posted. And the first question was posted by Dean Barker, And the question is this: when President Pissarro says that she, quote, supports Black Lives Matter, does she mean the concept that Black Lives Matter, the corporation known as Black Lives Matter, or both? So if you give me 1 second, I am going to enable President Pissarro to address that question. So I have turned on her mic.
Okay. Hi, thank you for that question. I don't know enough about the corporation Black Lives Matter. So I would have to know more before I answer that, but the principle, not so much the concept, but the principle that Black people's lives are sacred, important, and as important as everybody else's lives, but not even in a comparison. Black people matter. They matter for who they are, for what they have done, for what they can do. Black people matter. Brown people matter, not more or less than anybody else. On their own, they are critical members of our society, and they matter to all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Pissarro.
So the next question posted was by Lanisha Hart. Ms. Hart's question or statement is this: with the epidemic of marginalization in education in high poverty schools and the lack of efficient teachers at the helm, how can we promote politics efficiently and afford students an equal and equitable opportunity to run for office and fare well with non-colored students and potential competition?
Has Ms. Roscoe rejoined us?
She has.
Okay.
Yes, I'm back. So who asked that question, David?
Ms. Lanisha Hart.
Hi, Ms. Hart. So I think your question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, she's asking how can we encourage teachers to run for office with so many students being in the classrooms? Can you sum up the question? It seems
I'll actually reread it. So with the epidemic of marginalization in education in high poverty schools and the lack of efficient teachers at the helm, how can we promote politics efficiently and afford students an equal and equitable opportunity to run for office and fare well with non-colored students and potential competition?
Got it. Okay. Hi, Ms. Hart. So pretty much what we can do is, it's important that Black students see Black people in office. I feel as though they don't see that enough at the local level. So those are some of the ways that we can encourage our students to actually run when they know that they can aspire to do that themselves. It's not enough for us to just say, you can be anything that you want to be. I encourage you for it. Yeah, that's great. But if they don't know what that looks like, and if they've never seen it, they're sort of saying, okay, do I have to be the trailblazer myself? Or can I rely on someone else to be that for me? So what do? We encourage our students to run for office by partnering with so many organizations. I'm a part of a very great organization that actually encourages students to not just run for office, but to also volunteer on campaigns. It's called Amplify Her. And within that organization, one of the things that we do is we encourage young people, in addition to adults, but we have a component where we work with young people in schools, and we have them meet with potential candidates who are running for a specific office. And we have them, we have the candidates sort of act like a mentor in some aspects, where they can, again, see people who are running for office, particularly Black women. All of the candidates that we've endorsed this year, again, the name of the organization is called Amplify Her. All of the candidates that we endorsed this year have been women of color, Black, Latino, Asian women. We also have endorsed queer women. A lot of students don't see that either. A lot of people may say, okay, we don't want to talk about that diaspora, but they're important because they're Black people too. They're Latino people too. They're Asian people too. But for the sake of this conversation, we're focusing on Black people. So I think it's important for students to be able to see what it is that we're sort of pushing them and elevating them to do, and then partnering with those organizations or elected officials who provide that resource. Also, there are so many elected officials who have no problems with taking on students and acting as their mentors, just so that then they can have them volunteering in their office and sort of seeing the day-to-day. So I think it's important that we're putting our Black students in those spaces, as opposed to allowing them, not saying that parents allow them to, but as opposed to them being on the streets doing goodness knows what. They could be doing something more constructive. And that's a part of what led me personally into the political sphere. I've always knew that I wanted to be something, I just didn't know what. It ended up being politics because I've always known that I wanted to advocate for people who look like me, people who didn't have a competent and relentless voice. And I think it's important for more and more students to see that, seeing the Black attorneys, seeing the Black, again, elected officials, the Black educators, the Black PhD, the PhD holders, so that then they know I can be a scholar in my field, I can be competent. And I think that it's important for them to see that, because that's the only way that we're gonna create that generational mindset of, okay, let's invoke a level of change. Because change can start at the grassroots level, and sometimes it's our young people, oftentimes, it's not sometimes, oftentimes, it's our young people, the generation that came before us, that actually brings forth that change. So having them see what we do. And Ms. Hart, you can also link up with me. You can connect with me. My Twitter handle is @Melinda2K7, and I can put you in contact with any organization. Again, there's Amplify Her that I'm the Brooklyn Borough Director of. Also the Brooklyn Young Democrats Women's Caucus. I'm the chair. We do work, again, and I also represent, as the New York State Young Democrats Caucus of Color Chair, I also represent all of the young Democrats throughout New York State, ages 16 through 36. So it goes pretty well back. So they can definitely partner with me, and I'll have them work inside of meeting with these elected officials and engaging and actually doing the work, and also nourishing their minds, so that then they can say, okay, I know what I need to do. So by the time they're my age, they've already probably ran for office. They've already led campaigns. They led initiatives. They've even served, not just led, but also served. So those are some of the things that I want to see. And I hope that that answers your question. If it didn't, you can definitely post it in the chat, and we could have dialogue back and forth. But don't forget to connect with me on Twitter @Melinda2K7.
David, I just want to jump in. Oh, Leslie, just really quickly. Citizens Committee for New York City was about improving neighborhoods, blocks, and getting people who aren't running nonprofit organizations, but just organizing small groups of people together to clean up lots or to help folks that have been recently incarcerated reintegrate, or bring groups of immigrant people together. That is an entry point to civic engagement that can put you on a path of understanding the players on your block, the players in your neighborhood, and the local elected officials. Politics aren't necessarily something that you learn in school. You learn through lived experience and by organizing and being out there with others. So I'd also put out Citizens Committee, and applying for a grant from us is a great way for folks to get their feet wet and like organizing and gathering other people together in their community.
Thank you both. All right, so I'm going to, how many questions remain in the chat, David? I think you said initially that, I mean in the Q&A. I think you initially said that
the panelists are generating a lot of interest and enthusiasm, and we have 12 questions in the queue right now.
Okay, so I think we've answered 3 of the initial 7. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so how about this? We move on with the questions that I have for the panelists, and then we will go back to the panelists in the Q&A. And so I'm going to ask you to queue up the last video as a way to contextualize question number 3 for the panelists.
Alrighty, 1 second.
So I've been seeing a lot of things talking of the people making commentary. Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy Black people making a commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, you know, I feel like we should do both. And I feel like I support both. And I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest like this, there are three types of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want to fuck shit up, and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. Now, people are like, well, what did you gain? Well, what did you get from looting? I think that as long as we're focusing on the what, we're not focusing on the why, and that's my issue with that. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, well then, let's go with that. Let's say that's what it is. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor Blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that change, getting that bed, getting that phone, whatever it is that they're going to get, is that in that moment when the riots happen and if they present an opportunity of looting, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Why are people that food insecure, that clothing insecure, that they feel like their only shot, that they are shooting their shot by walking through a broken glass window to get what they need? And then people want to talk about, well, there's plenty of people who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and got it on their own. Why can't they do that? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. And I'm so glad that as a child, I got an opportunity to spend time at Push where they taught me this, is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa, that was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally at the release and the onset of that, they allow you to play and they say, okay, now you catch up. Now at this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is if the person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood, how can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the fuck do I give a shit about burning the fucking Football Hall of Fame, about burning the fucking Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give a fuck. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so fuck your Target. Fuck your Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this bitch to the ground. And it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
So that was pretty powerful, right? That was pretty powerful. And I wanted to show it as a way to frame my next question to the panelists. So given the scope of the sustained protests we've seen here in the US and around the world, are this sister's voice, her logic, and her sentiments representative in your view, panelists, of what Blacks feel in this moment? And is there a tipping point? And so I will ask Prasan to start off. Unmute.
Yeah, technical difficulty. Thank you for this opportunity and thank you for her voice, because I've read many pieces that spoke to the fact that it's not a time to lean on Black folks to help white people feel better about themselves. It's not a time to go to your Black friend and have them explain all the history that they've lived and that they've suffered and they've felt, because there's so much trauma from all the years and all the frustration that I think the moment has come for allies and co-conspirators that aren't Black to really pick up the mantle and carry some of the load, so that partnership can get us to a different place. And I say that specifically because I can't tell you the number of white, friends and colleagues that I had that reached out to me after the murder of George Floyd and wanted to have specific conversations with me. Yeah. And on one level, I felt it was an honor, but another level, I felt completely drained because it helps you relive that trauma over and over and over again. And so I think it's really important for white people in particular to have conversations with white folks to help figure this out. To get over the shame, because there is some shame that, oh, I never owned a slave, and I wasn't a segregationist, so it's not me. But we are all living in this society where we breathe in white supremacy, we breathe in misogyny and paternalism, we breathe in homophobia and all of those things, and we all need to overcome it. And some of us breathe it in and it's literally toxic to our beings. So surviving another day and being resilient another day is a feat in and of itself. So we need other folks that aren't even as affected as negatively by it to help us and to recognize that, as it's been said before, this is not who we want to be. This is not who we are. That we want a place where, equality and equal opportunities, that we want an opportunity where everyone has access to education, access to feed for themselves and to be sheltered. And we need our allies and our co-conspirators to fight as hard and to give up some of their privilege and put their privilege on the line so that we can get to where we need to get to. And so, yes, a lot of the pain that she expressed is real pain and real trauma that a lot of us feel. And there's a question about, you know, wealthy and upper middle class Blacks, and I'm sure, you know, we can almost be put out there, you know, Blacks that have made it in corporate America, folks who've had to wear the mask, as, you know, Paul Lawrence Dunbar was saying in his poem, you know, that they might not be affected, but we're all affected the moment that folks look down at as Blackness as being less than. And so the question is how we move forward. And my answer is that we need to mobilize people. We need to vote. We need to spend our money differently. And unfortunately, Colin Kaepernick took a knee in a peaceful protest, and it lost him his job. And it seemed that people paid much more attention when people were destroying property. And it seems like sometimes property is prioritized over people, and hopefully we can get past that and people can be prioritized, because that's what we should be, and that's who we are.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. And in a capitalist market society, people are commodified. There's a book, The Great Transformation. I forget who the author is off the top of my head, but it talks about how everything in capitalist societies get commodified. And so that's why people sort of get subsumed. I'm gonna move next to Joey to weigh in. Mr. Jackson.
So that was very powerful, and she was very passionate, and it really makes you think and reflect. And I think if I could feel what she was saying, and I did, and I will never purport to speak to for anyone unless I'm in a courtroom, in which case that's my job. I think everyone felt her pain. I think we felt her frustration. I think we felt some helplessness that she was referring to. We felt the systemic, really, oppression that she was speaking to. We felt the systemic, you know, really marginalization of our communities that she was speaking to, and just, you know, the being held down and the hopelessness that she was speaking to. But let me say a few things about that. I guess the first thing I would say is that we could never lose faith. The fact is that we have the ability and the power to do anything. We have been in places and we have been in dark moments in our history, and we have risen and we rise again. And so while we talk about and we see communities that are destroyed and burned, I cannot, and I apologize to, you know, those who may take an alternate view, I can't get to a place where I say F-U-C-K to burning down Target and F-U-C-K to burning down this and to destroying that. I can't get to that place. And so there is a frustration, and that frustration could boil over, and we've seen it boiled over by the destruction of communities. But I think that the message needs to be on point. That when things like that happen, it takes away from the message. It takes away from the message of hope. It takes away from a message of opportunity. It takes away from a message that we can make a movement, and we can have that movement enriched with so many people who feel the same way, that we have to make change and make it effectively. Because in my view, narratives are important. When I step into a court of law, or in the times of now, I'm on a computer and I'm arguing law, the fact is it's a narrative that carries the day. It's a narrative that people relate to, that resonates, that bring people to a place where they'll either agree with my message, in which case we will prevail, or they will disagree with my message, in which case I won't. But the narrative is taken away from when we talk about burning communities, when we talk about so many things that are occurring. Now, let me be clear in what I'm saying. I believe that people are protesting out there, and those protesters are people who are of goodwill. There are people who are humane, people who want change, and people who are making that effective change by exercising their First Amendment right to do so. I firmly believe that. I don't believe looters and rioters and everyone else is representative of the people who are out there doing what they do. I think that's a separate cross-section of whatever communities, whether they not be from the community or elsewhere, who are engaged in that. But I cannot condone nor respect the fact that we are burning places down. I don't care who owns it, right? So Disagree, agree, that's your business. But the fact is that I'm about uplifting our people. I'm about getting to a better place, not using venom, whatever that venom may be in me, for a destructive purpose. And so I say to everyone who will listen that I think that we can never lose faith. We have come too far.
Frozen, Joey.
We turn back when we recognize and we say, you know what, it's okay to burn things down. I don't care, it doesn't belong to me. No, I do care, and we need to care, and we need to be about building. We need to be about uplifting. We need to be about getting to that place. And so, yes, I get and I understand the anger and frustration. I'm a child of the Bronx. That's where I was born. That's where I was raised. I'm a child of a community where, you know, whatever. We all have our different youth, and we've grown up how we grew up. So I get it. I understand it. I've been there. I've done that. But the reality is if they're going to make movements and we're going to move ahead, then we have to keep our minds in a different place. If we don't have business opportunities, then let us create them within our communities. If we don't have appropriate or proper jobs, then let us get those jobs and support each other so that we could get to a better place. If we don't have businesses that cater to what we want to do, churches, whatever, groups that don't, then let's get them. But let's not destroy a thing. I will say this. So I belong to a prayer group because all of us need faith, particularly in these challenging times of COVID, these challenging times of police and communities and people who are getting killed every other day. You know, there's something wrong. And one of the things we addressed today was the issue of faith, the issue of not losing it, the issue of God's grace. The issue of God's grace allows us all here to be healthy and allows us as being healthy to have this conversation. But if we're going to fulfill the mission that we're on, if we're going to fulfill the purpose that we have here, I think we have to look for creative solutions. I think we have to look for answers. I think we have to look for opportunities to uplift each other, to build with each other, to develop with each other, and otherwise to enrich communities, not destroy them. And so, yes, there's been historic oppression. No one can deny that. And yes, there's been unfairness. No one can deny that. And yes, there's been a disproportionate impact and effect that so many things have had on people of color. I know that. The fact is that, listen, I could talk about the criminal justice system and the disparities that exist there all day and all night for as long, and finally you'll say, you know what, I heard you enough, brother. I hear you, okay. I get it. But what I also want everybody else to get is that we can't shake our faith. We cannot go to a place where we recognize and think that, you know what, this is hopeless. It's not. You know, I am so impressed by, and I've always been impressed by you, Dr. Branch, and what you do, and your family, and what you bring to the table. What a role model you are. I see the college that you're in and all the things and how highly you speak of them, and now I have an opportunity to be a part of this. Wow, that's powerful. Wow, what you're doing as a woman of color. And then I look at the other panelists. I look at Dr. Harris and the information that he provides and the education he has.
All right. So maybe we'll move on and ask Melinda and then Rasan.
I think he went out.
So,
come back?
So we're going to ask Melinda to give us about 5 minutes on that, and then Rasan. And that should take us to close to 7:30. I have a final question for the panelists, and then I do want to get to some of the questions that are in the chat, and then open up the audible Q&A. So
I guess it must have been something I said. This was something I said. I'm very sorry, but
no.
If I could
just good, brother.
Briefly, doctor, if I could conclude, I'm sorry, I disappeared. Somebody said enough of you, and they zipped me. impressed by, and I'll finish my thought, I'll stop. But I'm impressed by this panel, and I'm impressed with the energy I draw from it. I'm impressed by the incentive it gives me. I'm impressed because all of you make me better, and we make each other better. And we can make our society better, and we can make our communities better in the event that we develop politically, in the event that we develop business-wise. So let's not destroy, let's not lose hope, let's not lose faith, let's stay in faith. And let's look at it, and you know the story of David and Goliath, and we know what happened with David and Goliath. And so at the end of the day, I'll conclude before I get shut off again, but the fact is that we were able to move to a better place. And our history has shown us that we continue to move to better places. Yes, we have a long way to go. We got issues in our community, things that we got to overcome, but we're getting there. And we're at a moment in time that we need to be there. And so let's be there by uplifting each other, by loving each other, by supporting each other, and by building our businesses and our communities and not destroying them. And I'll cede my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. All right, Melinda about 5, and then Rasan 5, and that should take us close to 7:20-ish or so. And then I'll ask my final show question, and then we'll try to get to more of the questions in the chat, and then open the raise hand feature so people can speak audibly. Melinda.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to get to people who are in the chat. So that's important, because I saw some of the questions and I'm saying to myself, yes, guys, that's what I want to see. So continue asking those questions, conversing with each other. Some of you have been conversing with just the panelists, but if you want to converse with the panelists and attendees, that would be great. You should do that too, so that then everyone can see your comments. But to answer the question at hand regarding the video, I will say this. Black people are tired. Period. Black people are tired. We're frustrated, we're angry, we're annoyed. So going back to the young woman in the video, I can empathize with her sentiments as a fellow Black woman, because I'm saying to myself, I am tired of seeing my Black men be shot and killed. I am tired of same thing happening to my Black woman. Let's not forget about Breonna Taylor. Let's not forget about Sandra Bland. I mean, it's important that we say their names because people often tend to forget. So I'm just saying to myself, Black people are tired, Black people are frustrated, Black people are annoyed. So I know that Joey had mentioned, let's not forget about our faith, but I'll say this, faith without works is dead. And I'm not gonna greet racists with loves, peace, and hugs when they're trying to shoot me. I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. I'm angry, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated. And I'm not gonna say, oh, let me give you a hug as you're holding a gun to my head, whether it's figuratively or literally. I'm not gonna pray away the situation that's happening around me and hope for the best. I'm honestly done with that. So I'm not gonna, so excuse me if people feel as though I'm denouncing faith, that's not what I'm doing, but I am being cognizant to the fact that having faith alone is not gonna get us to where we wanna go. We can't pray this away. People hate us systemically off of the pure premise of not only us being Black, but us saying we want the same rights, liberties, and freedoms that you have, right? So it's sort of, we're in a space of where they're now saying to us, well, how dare you want that? You don't get that. That's sort of relegated for just us. And we're saying, no, we deserve that. We're people too. So again, not denouncing faith, but I'm not willing to greet people with love, peace, and hugs who are trying to kill me. That's not going to happen.
Thank you. Oh, so I'm gonna now, Rasan, weigh in if you would.
I just have like one thought. Ta-Nehisi Coates and Beyond the World and Me has one quote: as an African-American, we stand on the shoulders of people who fought despite not seeing victories in their lifetime. So fatalism is not an option. So we are tired, we are sad, tears have been falling, there's been frustration. But at the end of the day, we come from folks that fought when they couldn't see the sun. They couldn't almost imagine the sun. And I think that's what we're going to continue to do. And I love what a lot of what the panelists have all said. And I think it takes a little bit of righteous indignation to get to where we need to get to. And obviously we can't tear down our own communities. We can't tear down other folks because it does see some of the moral high ground, but we need to put real pressure on folks so that we can't be ignored. And I think the balance of all of that is going to get us to a better place. And ultimately, we need coalitions of folks that are just so upset and so impatient with the injustice that they can't take it either. And like I said before, it can't just be a Black thing. I think all of us need to be so disgusted with, where we've gotten, that change happens. And the one last thing is, I feel that we've never had a true healing of the original founding sins of our country, and that's why we are where we are today. I've said it before, it's kind of like if you're in the house and you have rotten drywall and you cover it up with like wallpaper and paint, like until you rip it out, you can never get to the healing. And they've done that healing in Nazi Germany. They've done that healing in Northern Ireland. They've done that healing in Rwanda or South Africa, and we've never done it here. And until we do, I think we won't get to the place where we really need to be.
All right, thank you so much, Rasan. And now my final question to the panelists, and it was a great segue that you provided. And so I'm going to address it first to the lawyer on our panel. And by the way, Joey, I was supposed to be an attorney, but I decided after doing, I worked for a law firm as a paralegal, and as a way to sort of figure out if I wanted to go to law school, we did a pro bono racial discrimination case. Of course, the firm won, but I was a little disappointed because while we won, it was narrow in the sense that you could, if you could pay for justice, you could get it, or if somebody would do it for you pro bono, you could get it. And so I opted for law's first cousin, which is public policy, which has broader implications. And so the book that I wrote, which was my dissertation, Optimism at All Costs, Black Attitudes, Activism, and Advancement in Obama's America, heavily speaks to the notion of narratives and how elites frame and shape those narratives.
Is that me or is that Leslie?
I'm sorry, say again? And so this book definitely speaks to the power that narratives have to coalesce a group of people and help them to create a social movement to bring about change. And so here is my final question, and it's addressed first to Joey. So from a negotiation standpoint, the most leverage one has when an accord or a deal is being struck is at the inflection point. And so in this watershed moment, we are arguably at that inflection point, and we arguably have the most leverage. And so from each of you, starting with Joey, what is the ask? What should Black people be asking for?
So I missed a little bit of it because I guess my Wi-Fi, I have to get a little better. So we'll have to make that improvement. But let me say this. You're saying what we should ask for in terms of what legally, socially, economically, all of the above?
All of the above.
Well, I think there's a number of things. First and foremost is that I think we've reached the crescendo. I think, again, as I mentioned before, we've reached the crossroad. And I think that the word, if we're talking about it in a legal perspective, it means justice. Now, justice means different things to different people. But I don't know so much that I would use the term ask for justice. I would use the term demand. And the fact is that we have to get to another place. And the place we have to get to is a place that we are respected. The place we have to get to is a place that we're not demeaned and mistreated. The place we have to get to is that we're not judged, and that we're not prejudged, and that we're not looked at as less than, and we're not made, you know, where other people, particularly when it involves policing, that they're scared of us. And so when we talk about what to ask for, again, I'd use the term demand. We're at a place in time where we need to demand justice. We need to demand that, you know what, we need to reach a place where people respect us, where people do not look at us and discriminate us based upon the color of their skin and what they believe they see. The fact is that you can talk about, you know, oh, well, oh, you know, you wear suit and tie and this, that, and the other thing. Well, you know what? The fact is that I wear shorts and sneakers and things like everybody else. And then we're seeing that people in our communities, when you're dressed in, you know, the regular garb or whatever, you're another black man, you're another black woman. And so the fact is that justice means that we have to reach a place of equality. Justice means that we have to reach a place economically where we have opportunities like everyone else has opportunities with respect to the development of business, with respect to getting contracts, with respect to being able to sustain families and communities. That's important. When it comes to legal issues, we have to reach a place in our criminal justice system where we're not stopped as much, where we're not, you know, really sought out as much, where we're not hunted down and shot Ahmaud Arbery as much, where we're not prejudged as much, and where we have a system of justice which treats us as we should be treated. And so I think we're at a point in time that we're seeing justice demanded throughout the country. We're at a point in time where there are reforms happening throughout the country. We're at a point in time where people of all goodwill and everyone else understand that we have to get to a place of mutual respect. And so the one thing that I would say in terms of what we're demanding is that we have to demand justice, and we have to not only demand justice, but we have to take the appropriate steps to acquire justice. Power cedes nothing without demand. But in making that demand, we also have to march towards achieving our objective. We can, and I do agree, we can pray all day, and you know, perhaps some people pray more than others. People, you know, everybody does themselves. But while we're praying, we also have to be vigilant. We also have to be active. We also have to march for our goals. Every one of us may have an objective. Every one of us may have a wish. Every one of us may have something we want to do. And I say that we have to put that plan into action. And so let us ask for justice, let us demand justice, and let us get justice at the end of the day, so that we can equalize opportunities in our community, that we can equalize justice in our community, and that we can ultimately become and get to a place where we've come too far to turn back now. Where is that place from which we won't turn back? And the place that where we are that we won't turn back is a seat at the table so that we can make compelling and important decisions about our futures, about legislation, about business, and about opportunities, so all of us can live in peace and all of us can prosper. Thank you.
Thanks, Joey. And so I'm gonna move now to Melinda and then to Rasan, the same question. What is it that we should be asking for in this moment?
Again, so kind of like Joey said, we should not be asking for anything, we should be demanding. And one of the ways that we can demand is by literally causing a brouhaha when we see something in our communities that are not working. Because we're kindly asking for people to sort of hear us and feel our pains. We're even recording and showing it to them when our people are being shot, killed, and murdered on the streets. And that alone is not enough. So if we have to cause a ruckus and protest every gosh darn day, then that is some of the things that we can do. If we have to take our message to the White House, to our local city council offices, to our elected officials, if we have to tear the city up. I'm not encouraging anyone to loot. No, I'm not doing that. But in order for our voices to be heard, that seems to be the only way that people hear us, is when we're causing civil unrest. And it's unfortunate that we have to do that to gain justice, because other races, mainly white people, do not have to do that. But for Black people, before we could even reach a mecca of justice, we have to go through so many hurdles and barriers. As we see, Breonna Taylor's murderers have not been arrested as of yet, right? We're still in battle for George Floyd to get him justice. So I'm saying those are some of the things that we need to do. Cause a little bit of civil unrest. Other cultures pay for their justice. I was reading a comment that someone wrote. Yeah, other cultures do pay for their justice, but they don't necessarily have to pay, because if you're white, you automatically get justice. So there's nothing to fight for in that instance, whereas to Black people, that's not the case for us. And it's unfortunate. And again, going back to what I said earlier, again, we want to see more of us in office in legislative positions, so that then this way we don't have to always fight for what it is that we want. Again, kinfolk Black people, not just any Black person. I don't want Omarosa Manigault Newman or Stacey Dash being in a position of power. Those are not the types of Black people that I'm looking for. I'm looking for more people like me who are unapologetically Black, who has no problem with saying, you know what, there's injustice. My people are marginalized and disenfranchised. What are we going to do about it? People who are not scared to speak up when they do have a seat at the table, and when they are in a position of power, they're not apprehensive to where they say, well, I want to keep my position, so I'm going to take more of a laissez-faire approach. That's not what we need. We need kinfolk Black people who say, you know what, my people are oppressed, my people are marginalized and disenfranchised, and I want to do something about it. And I have no problem with causing a ruckus and a brouhaha when it's needed, when I feel that my people are not getting what they want. So those are some of the things that we need. But I ask that you, all the viewers, while we're speaking, post in the chat, what are some of the things that you're going to do going forward to sort of gain justice and equality and equity for Black and brown people? Because I definitely want to hear from you. I'm actually reading the comments, or all of us are reading the comments. So it's good to see that you know, this conversation has sparked you and gotten your wheels turning in terms of what it is that you're going to do, whether it's running for office, leading and serving on campaigns, taking on a young mentee and encouraging them to actually do the work, joining your local NAACP. If you live in Brooklyn, I'm on the board of the Brooklyn branch NAACP. Definitely join us in the work that we're doing. We're doing great work, so I want to see in the comments and in the chat some of the things that you're doing.
Okay, Dr. Harris, what is the ask or the demand?
No, the ask is justice for sure, but we need to operationalize justice. We need to tell people what justice looks like. And it's not, you know, treat me fairly. I'd like for you to, you know, be open for me to be in the same schools as you are in, and share the same neighborhoods. But what we really need to do is measure disparities, figure out where there are gaps that are happening for Black people to white people, and look at it and figure out, like, what are we as a society going to do to shrink them? And then keep measuring until those gaps are closed. So we have health disparities. You know, what are the social determinants of health? What are the things that are causing Black people to have more hypertension, more diabetes, to have a higher infant mortality rate, and then make sure that there is a public investment and interested private individuals that make sure that they shrink those disparities so that Black people and white people have the same kind of outcomes in the same activities. And it also looks like recognizing where there are wealth gaps. You know, Darrick Hamilton, who, you know, was my dissertation chair, and same for Dr. Branch, they came up with this policy idea of creating baby bonds, which, you know, each child born here in the United States would have an account open for them and money invested in it when they were born to help them to have wealth that they can depend on as they are growing older and trying to figure out how they're going to finance college, or having money to help them buy their first apartment or other expenses they deal with, because the wealth gap determines what kind of opportunities people go after. If you have wealth, then you can stay in school longer as opposed to have to go out to a job and work to get food on the table right away. If you have wealth, you might be able to start a business and take that chance because you have that wealth to get into, so you become an entrepreneur and have a chance to get a higher levels of success. Without that wealth, you don't have those safety nets. And you know, before COVID, there was a study that most Americans don't have $400 saved away in case of an emergency, let alone after COVID, when you have record depression level rates of unemployment. And so I think one of the things, and I am a man that I'm a faithful man, I'm a spiritual man, you know, I believe that there's a purpose for everything. And so sometimes, you know, you go through the valley you know, to be made stronger and to come out better. And I think that in this time of great crisis, that hopefully that we can build a better society and better opportunity for all, that we can shrink some of those disparities. And, you know, justice and what we should be asking for is we should ask for folks to measure what's happening to our people everywhere, you know, around New York City, for example, and figuring out how, you know, what government's going to do and how folks are going to address it. Because ultimately, prevention is better than having to repair. If you get to the point where you have to go to the emergency room, that's much more expensive than it was if folks were taken care of and got basic health care earlier on. And that's happening in society in multiple levels. And we need to make sure that, you know, we take care of the least of these, because, you know, as they go, you know, the canary in the mine shaft is just a harbinger of what's to come for the rest of society. So it's in everybody's best interest to make sure that Black people and those who have been vulnerable for years have a true opportunity to be full partners at the table.
Thank you so much, Rasan. And so we are at about 7:38 in the afternoon, in the evening. And I'd like to, I know we probably have tons of questions in the chat, but I do want to provide the opportunity for folks to ask some of those questions audibly. So maybe we can we can see who put those questions in the chat and then maybe open up their mic so they can ask them. Is that a strategy you believe that's possible?
One possible issue is that some people may have left after posting their questions, so they may not be available to ask. So what I will tell you, Dr. Branch, is that we have 40 questions, it looks like, in the queue.
Oh, okay.
And we have 97 attendees. So I'm wondering if you would want to devote a certain amount of time to questions that are in the queue.
We can do that, certainly.
and then open it up for whatever time you want for questions from the floor.
All right, so let's maybe devote 10 to 12 minutes to what's in the queue, and then the rest for audible questions.
Okay.
So again, as I stated at the top of the presentation, we wouldn't be able to get to all of the Q&A that were in that area, but we do want to present the opportunity for people to be heard asking their questions as well. So about 10 minutes for the Q&A.
Okay, so I'll, no pun intended, I'll take a cue from you as to when to stop the Q&A and move to the floor. And I'll just continue with as in the sequence that the questions were posted. So that the next question was from Dr. Charles Gray, who is a longtime full-time member of the college's faculty. And his request was, and this goes back to the early part of the discussion, provide an example of one law you would like to see passed in New York State.
So that was with regard to the question, I guess about question 3, where I was asking about equity and equality and what can be done. So Joey, I think that sort of hinged off of something that you were saying with regard to laws.
Yeah, you know, interestingly enough, it's not a fair question for me to answer because it's too easy, not because I have any specialized knowledge, but because the New York State Legislature just passed a series of police reforms that I was grateful that they passed. And so, you know, I'm glad for this softball, but I mentioned laws earlier, and there's been a whole new host of police reforms regarding banning of chokeholds, regarding the state attorney general really prosecuting, you know, law enforcement and they being separate and apart from local district attorney's office, you know, where there's a death involved. I think we also can do more in the false reporting area. We've seen what occurred as it related to Amy Cooper and the whole issue in Central Park. I think when you're calling and making false reports predicated upon race and racial hate, I think we could do something there. But there's a host of things we can do, and I'll just finally say, I know we're pressed for time, that, you know, all the legislation we have, we cannot legislate, again, I've said it 3 times, morality. We have to move people to a place of common understanding and decency, and I think if we do that, we could change more than laws. We can change perspectives, we can change understandings, and ultimately we can have a better change in society.
All right, David, next question. What do we got?
Okay, the next question is from Maria Alejandra Trumbull, and it's directed to Ms. Rasco. Melinda, I saw judicial candidates on the primary ballot just a few weeks ago, but found it very difficult to find any information on the candidates. Do you have suggestions of resources to research candidates in local elections?
Yes, I do. Yes, there were primary candidates on the ballot. And again, those positions are for a decade. So what you can do to research candidates who are on the ballot is a lot of local political clubs, they tend to endorse candidates in addition to what you could find online about any of the candidates. But local political clubs tend to endorse candidates. I know my local political club, Brooklyn Young Democrats, we endorse a judicial candidate. So many of them have to go through a vetting and a screening by the New York Bar Association and various bar associations throughout the state and the city before they could even be deemed viable and, you know, meet the standard for those positions. So you definitely want to do your online research. You definitely want to couple that with meeting with individuals who are a part of your local political clubs, because they do intense screenings also on each of the candidates. So you can learn about their platform and where they stand. And also, again, the Brooklyn NAACP, I think I mentioned them earlier, we do judicial panels and screenings of candidates. So we had 4 judges running for office last year, and 3 of them were Black, 1 of them was white, and we wanted to make sure that, being that this person was going to be representing a predominantly Black district, that we asked them questions about their stances on Black issues. So if you partner with your local NAACP, we also do screenings on each of the candidates, so that then, and it's called candidate forums. That's the proper name of it. It's called the candidate forum. So that then this way you can ask questions and you can learn more about the candidates who are running. So again, their online research, check out where they stand within the various bar associations that they are a part of. Every lawyer, you know, has to go, if they're looking to become a judge, they have to meet various standards.
You're muted.
Meeting with your local clubs, whether it's Democrat or Republican clubs, just to see where they stand. And then again, also partner with me, and I will let you know more information about how you can conduct that in-depth research.
All right, so David, it's about 7:45, and I know we're scheduled to wrap up, so I'm gonna suggest that we shift to folks who may want to ask a question audibly, and just use their final 15 minutes to engage with our audience that way.
All right, and people are taking your cue and raising their hands. So the first person to raise their hand is Stephanie Dawkins Jones.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Ms. Jones, you need to unmute. Okay, she dropped out of the queue. So the next person is Ava Armstrong.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi. Okay, first I would like to say thank you, guys. Let me take off this mask. I'm quarantined at home, so I apologize. So I just want to thank you guys for inviting me into this Q&A. It actually fed my soul. I was feeling really despaired, hopeless. And I feel like with all the things that's been going on has been a testimony to my energy and my faith in people. I just feel so heavy, I cannot really explain to you. So when I was invited, I was not feeling well, but I said I have to participate because anything that Leslie Branch and David Hahn is participating in, I need to be there. And I'm so glad that I pushed myself to get all dressed up and be on this audio. So my first question is, when are we going to do this again? Because obviously this is so needed.
So that's a great question. This is the inaugural of what hopefully will be many town hall events. I imagine other constituencies in the college will organize events as well. So I would suggest staying tuned to your email to see what's up and coming. Perhaps there will be things that are put on the college's calendar in advance. So I can't tell you exactly what's happening, but this is not a one-off event for sure. And thank you for that question.
Thank you. And I also have just one additional question. I have my daughter who just graduated at St. John University. She's going to be a physician assistant. And I have another daughter who just graduated, who's going to law school. I was a teenage mom. So I know about hardship and I know about overcoming. And one of the things that was shared in the panel that I must give my opinion, faith is necessary. Because without faith, there's no tomorrow. It's the reason why I wake up every day, knowing that through my faith, tomorrow can be different. And without faith, I don't know where I would be as a single parent, as a teenage mom. So I urge all of you, never ever to put faith aside, because in these trying times, it's a must. So my question is, the police department, I know funds was $1 billion, $1 million, if I remember correctly, was reduced from the budget to allocate into the Black community to help the Black community of all the things that's going on. So who is the overseer of the allocation of this budget? And what does that look like for the future? Because my fear is, are they going to be more aggressive, more hostile? Is it going to be a positive thing? Like, I'm just a little worried about it.
So can one of the panelists address that?
Yes, I can. I'm actually having difficulty with my camera, so I'm just going to take it off. So yes, I can. The overseer of the $1 billion that the New York Police Department has now been decreased to is the New York City Council, as well as the mayor's office. So anytime in New York City we have anything pertaining to budget, we have anything pertaining to money in New York City, that is the New York City Council, because they're the ones who vote on it, as well as the mayor combined. Right? So it's more so the New York City Council. And that's why I encourage people to make sure that when they're voting for elected officials, particularly those in the New York City Council, that they're doing their research on these candidates, because some of them are not necessarily the best, and a lot more could be done. I was hoping that personally that the budget would be decreased at least by half, and that was not the case. $1 billion is honestly nothing in the onset in terms of decreasing of the budget, because they still have $5 billion to do what it is that they do. And that is, the money is supposed to be allocated or redistributed into programs such as social services, making sure that the police officers are no longer acting as social workers, right? Therapists, law enforcement. They were initially doing providing a lot of these services unsuccessfully, especially in Black communities. They were initially providing a lot of these services combined. Now the money is supposed to be reallocated toward other agencies and entities that that actually specializes in that work. But $1 billion is not going to be enough. So that's a big issue. So to answer your question, who decided on that? It was the New York City Council. Did they do a good job? No. Could they have done better? Yes. But most of them are term limited anyway. We're going to have a brand spanking new city council this time next year. Many of them are not running, well, they can't run for re-election because again, they're term limited. So did they act in the best interest of what we needed as Black people? No. So to answer your question, it's the New York City Council combined with the mayor.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you so much.
The next question comes from Ray McMillan.
Hi everyone, good evening. Actually, I am Vashawn Smith. I'm an adjunct at MCNY and I'm on Ray's link because I didn't get the link to join. So I joined on Ray's link. First, I'd just like to say I am honored and I am grateful for just being a part of this conversation. I think when you are instructing a group of people and you're helping them grow in their consciousness, it's very emphatically important to grow in yours. And so I respect the conversation, but I also need to implore people to try to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And what that means is speaking your truth, but also speaking and going back and using history so you can speak the facts. Because we're not allowed as Black people to speak facts without feeling that we have to apologize for that. That's one. Two, ownership, ownership, ownership. The checks get respect. If Black people owned media, if Black people owned businesses, if we had our land, if we had hospitals, if we had ownership, we would be respected because then we have positions on that monopoly board. They're not going to kill me if they think I'm going to feed them. Right now, they are feeding us and they know that we don't own anything. So we need to have these real conversations and dialogue. And yes, it's going to come off as being angry. I'm very angry. You know, I also do radio at WBLS, and I had an interview with the owner of Black Enterprise magazine, and I asked him the question. He wanted it. I asked him the question, is it unrealistic for Black people to think that we are not at war and won't have to literally fight for our lives at this point? And he mentioned hope. And it pissed me off even more because where does hope play? That's like using love. Really, what does that have to do with it? Are we gonna have to fight or not? If someone tries to kill me or my loved ones, am I gonna have to defend myself? Should I have that energy? Should I feel comfortable knowing that I might have to fight? And these are just the conversations we need to have. And I really do support the constructive conversation, but at some point we have to deconstruct those political norms and socially politically correct conversations so we can have the real conversation. So I thank you for this. I support anyone who's willing to organize group economics for Black people, and I support the change in that. And I advise people to start reading books from our Black scholars and writers who talk about economics because they have a lot to say. Dr. Claude Anderson is one of them as well. So I thank you. I want everyone to be safe, and I want everyone to stay safe and be okay in this pandemic, because that in itself is a racial pandemic going on, and there's a systemic health issue pandemic going on that's a whole nother conversation. But I thank everyone, and please everyone stay safe.
Thank you so very much. And David, it's about 7:56, so one more or wrap up?
Sure. And our final question is from Cheryl Fleming.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone. That was a very great panel. Yeah, my question is, I did heard some of the great questions that had been asked and some of the answers that have been answered. It was very well done. I thank everyone. I just want to say that love is the answer. As a child growing up, I always, yes, my grandmother used to say, love is the answer of all things. And I believe Blacks, everyone, we should like just come together and love each other. The problem that we are facing right now, the problem is a sin problem because we chose to that this one, we blame this group, and everything like that. But if we just come together and just love each other and forgive, things going to be changed. A lot of things going to change. Just a love and forgiveness.
Thank you so very much. And now with the 3 remaining minutes that we have, I want to thank all of our panelists, Mr. Joey Jackson, Dr. Asan Harris, Ms. Melinda Roscoe, and I want to give a shout out to Mr. David Hahn, who without his ability to hit the ground running and learn the ins and outs of Zoom webinar, we would not have been able to bring this panel and this programming to you. Just want to thank also the folks in marketing and communications who helped push this information out. And we are just so blessed to have had the turnout that we had, and I'm grateful to them for that as well. And then finally, to President Pissarro and to Vice President Frickendale for just having the foresight to ask me to put this program together. It stemmed from an article that I wrote in Blavity, which essentially dealt with white fragility. And it was a cross between, it was the intersection of white fragility and Du Bois's double consciousness, and how the souls of Black folk have been mortgaged to support the white, the souls of white folk for more than 400 years and no more. So that's where the title for this panel came from. And again, my heartfelt thanks to all of the MCNY community, near and far, to the panelists once again. And my hope is that, you know, we'll be bringing you more programming in the future. So with that said, everybody stay safe and make sure you know, engage civically, do something to help this movement forward. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.